Chapter 1. After being reborn, I no longer stood in the way of any contact between Evelyn and her childhood sweetheart. She gave all her wages to her childhood sweetheart to chase his dream. I used the money I earned from hard work to invest. She got pregnant by her childhood sweetheart and gave birth in the hospital. I bought a southbound train ticket. Later she said that if I agreed to adopt the child she had with her childhood sweetheart, she would agree to marry me. Too bad, with memories from my previous life, I had already secured my first pot of gold. This time around, I chose to let them be and to prosper alone. Victor, you've always performed well at our factory, but the factory's profits are down this year. As a long-time employee, I'm sure you can understand, right? Hearing those familiar words, I felt dizzy for a moment. 1 second before, I had been lying alone on a hospital bed, suffering and waiting sadly for death. But at this moment, I was back 30 years. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Mr. Gao's weathered face. The workshop supervisor's insincere smile stretched like old leather, and behind him, the bulletin board displayed production quotas in red ink, numbers that had once meant everything to me. Looking at his calculating expression, my chest tightened with bitterness and, at the same time, swelled with joy. I hadn't expected to get a second chance. The scent of machine oil and metal shavings filled the small office, mixing with the stale cigarette smoke that clung to everything in this place. Through the grimy window, I could see the factory floor where dozens of workers bent over their stations, the rhythmic clatter of machinery drowning out their conversations. What lay in front of me was a voluntary resignation agreement. A few short sentences, and I would lose everything I had. I stared at him without expression. I've produced results for the factory, and my year-end evaluations are all excellent. Making me redundant can't be solely your decision, can it? Evelyn's face flashed through my mind. Although I already knew the answer, I couldn't help asking. The supervisor's face turned awkward. After a long moment, he sighed, adjusting the collar of his worn blue uniform. Victor, this has always been a family matter for you. I'm only following orders from above and doing things by the book. He didn't say it outright, but I understood. It was Evelyn's instruction. All along, she had looked down on me, thinking I was undereducated and had only gotten into the factory through family connections and money. She, on the other hand, was one of the few college graduates in town and naturally beautiful, with her delicate features, graceful bearing, and the kind of confidence that came from always being the smartest person in the room. If it weren't for the fact that my mother and her mother had been childhood friends and arranged an engagement between us when we were little, our lives would never have crossed. The one she liked was her childhood sweetheart, Marcus Zhang. The high achiever who had returned from studying abroad, carrying himself with the easy sophistication of someone who had seen the world beyond our small industrial town. There had never been a place in her heart for me. Thinking of this, I felt a great weight lift off me. The crushing anxiety that had defined my previous life, the desperate need to prove myself worthy, simply evaporated. Facing the supervisor's slightly nervous look, I gave a faint smile. All right, supervisor. I'll sign. He was clearly taken aback, as if he hadn't expected me to accept so calmly. His pen hovered uncertainly over his clipboard, and I could see him struggling to reconcile my reaction with whatever script he'd prepared. After hesitating, he sighed again. Victor, why don't you have another talk with your family? Your work ability is strong, it would be a shame to be laid off like this. I shook my head with a smile and looked out the window, where the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the factory courtyard. Workers were beginning to gather their things, the end-of-shift whistle still 20 minutes away but already felt in the air. No need. The world is big, I want to see it. The confusion in his eyes deepened. He seemed unable to understand, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Other factories may be better, but our factory isn't bad, things will get better. I smiled even more brightly. You can't explain winter ice to an insect born in summer. His perception was still limited to the small patch of land in our town. Little did he know that compared to the national picture, this wave of layoffs was only the tip of the iceberg. Before long, this layoff tide would sweep across the whole country. State-owned enterprises would crumble, taking with them the iron rice bowl that had fed generations. By the time people began looking for ways to survive, it would already be too late. But I knew what was coming. Reform and opening up. Market economics. The Southern boom. Opportunities that would make a factory job look like pocket change. I decisively took my personal belongings and the layoff notice and left the dormitory. My few possessions fit easily into a canvas bag, some clothes, a thermos, a few books I'd never opened, and the small wooden photo frame that held a picture of my parents. Before I left, I saw the layoff list posted on the bulletin board. My name was conspicuously on it, written in the same red ink as the production quotas. Below mine were a dozen others, all of us casualties of changing times. Evelyn, were you really that impatient? Chapter 2. In my last life, to keep my job at the factory, I begged a lot of people and used many tricks. All because I didn't want to lose the work I relied on to survive. I especially didn't want to lose my status as a regular employee, for fear Evelyn would look down on me even more. That respectable job was my capital to hold my head up in front of Marcus Zhang. Evelyn had a great figure, a pretty face, came from a good family, and was a top student. You could say she was the dream woman for many men in town. So I never wanted to hand her over to someone else. During the mass layoffs in my previous life, because I had behaved properly and worked hard, I squeezed Marcus out and managed to stay at the factory. It was around then that Evelyn's attitude toward me turned icy. Even after we married under pressure from Mrs. Wu, she never spent the night at home. She'd rather sleep in the factory's 8-person dorm than share a room with me. The sad truth was that even after years of marriage, Evelyn and I never had any intimacy. We hardly even saw each other except in hurried glimpses during factory meetings. Then things changed when she went on a 2-year business trip and returned with a 2-year-old boy she said she'd adopted. Because Evelyn and I had no children of our own, I didn't resist the boy much. I treated him like my own son and poured all my care into him. Whatever he wanted, I bit my teeth and provided. But he never wanted to get close to me. What he looked forward to most after school was going to see Evelyn. I always thought it was natural for a child to prefer his mother. I had no idea, until the end of my life, what the truth was. For the past 30 years, my nominal wife had long ago become pregnant with another man's child. All those years, her business trips were actually spent with Marcus. Especially after Marcus was laid off, he happened to catch the wave of the reform and opening up. Evelyn, to keep him focused, naturally took on the role of housewife. But I never expected she would entrust the child to me. While I got up at dawn and worked late caring for their child, they traveled the country together. They left footprints at nearly every famous scenic spot. My life, meanwhile, followed the dull line between factory and home. Even in Mrs. Wu's old age, it was me who looked after her. When I finally learned the truth, I couldn't bear the blow and fell ill. At that moment, I understood a phrase, there is no greater sorrow than a heart that has died. I had thought that even if Evelyn treated me coldly, at least I was still her husband. So I was willing to be a stay-at-home husband for her. I believed that if I were sincere enough, she would eventually notice my goodness. Even when people pitied me, gossiped about me, and mocked me, I had no regrets. Everyone said I didn't live like a man. Some even used me as a warning, a useless man who can't control his wife ends up like this. I never paid those words much mind. But lying alone on my sickbed, barely clinging to life, I regretted it. Evelyn came to the hospital with the child I had raised, the boy I had changed diapers for and fed with my own hands. She wasn't there to visit me out of care. As his wife, she had a duty to bury me after I died. The child came up impatiently and asked me, "Dad, where did you put the bank book?" I forced my aching body to open my eyes and spat out a sentence full of hatred through my teeth, "Get out. I am not your father." They wanted to take everything from me. But I refused. Back when my body had already begun to fail, I had donated everything I owned. Even if I died, I would not leave them a single penny. And yet, even so, looking at those two, my heart was still full of regret. Why had I wasted my life for a woman? For just one woman, was it really worth throwing away an entire lifetime? Chapter 3. On my way home from the factory, one of the older ladies from the courtyard stopped me. Her eyes brimmed with envy as she clutched a woven basket of vegetables. "Victor, you really are lucky. Today I saw that girl Evelyn carrying a radio and a television home. Such rare treasures. Hurry back, I want to see too." As she spoke, she grabbed my arm and pulled me along toward my house, clearly eager to see the new things. Her steps were quick, her curiosity bubbling over like the steam from the communal cookstoves in the alley. I wanted to tell her there was no need to be so excited. After all, I knew very well, the television and the radio were not meant for me. My parents had died early in a factory accident, and the mill repossessed the house they'd been assigned. From then on, Mrs. Wu had taken me in, and I began a life of depending on others. The Wu family was well off, their house was the most impressive in the narrow alley, 3 bedrooms and a living room, spacious and bright, with whitewashed walls and a tiled roof that didn't leak during the rainy season. Evelyn almost always stayed at the dormitory, never coming home. Today was no exception. When we entered, there was no sign of a television or radio. The living room was tidy but empty, the wooden table bare except for a thermos of tea that had gone cold. The older lady, Auntie Wang, glanced around, frowning slightly, her brows knitting together under her graying hair. Then, as if she'd thought of something, she winked at me and nodded toward my bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. "Victor, is it in your room?" Before I could answer, an excited voice from next door cleared her doubts. It drifted through the thin partition wall, muffled but unmistakable. "Evelyn, you're so good to me. With a television, I can teach you English now." At that sound, Auntie Wang's eyes bulged in outrage. With fury, she dragged me along and kicked open the neighbor's door, the hinges creaking in protest. That was the first time since my rebirth that I saw Evelyn. She was holding a handkerchief, gently wiping the sweat from Marcus Zhang's forehead, her face soft with tenderness. Her dark hair was pinned back simply, but even in the dim light of the oil lamp, her beauty was evident, the high cheekbones, the almond eyes that had once made my heart ache. When he saw me standing in the doorway, Marcus's eyes flashed with smugness. He was strikingly handsome, tall and dashing, his eyes bright like stars under the foreign-style haircut he'd brought back from abroad. He wore a shirt and suit rare in that era, the fabric crisp and white, the collar slightly open revealing firm muscles honed from university sports. He raised a hand casually to greet me. "Victor, you're back. Perfect timing. Evelyn just gave me a television. Tonight I'll cook myself to show my thanks, come try my food too." I turned my gaze to Evelyn. Looking at her slightly rounded belly under the loose blouse, I suddenly realized how foolish my former self had been. Such an obvious pregnancy, and I had thought she'd only gained weight from stress at work. Before I could speak, Auntie Wang burst out, pointing at the television with biting sarcasm, her finger trembling. Well, well. I thought such an expensive thing was meant for Evelyn's fiancé. "So it's you, pretty boy, barging in." At her words, Evelyn's fine brows knit slightly, her lips pursing in irritation. Him? Someone who didn't even graduate high school, how could he even understand a television? Marcus is preparing for graduate school now, and he tutors me in English. Of course he needs the television more. Marcus lowered his head to meet her gaze, the love in his eyes undisguised, his hand brushing hers lightly. Auntie Wang sensed something amiss and opened her mouth, then thinking better of it, turned to me with a look urging me to speak, her expression a mix of sympathy and anger. I glanced at the television, its wooden cabinet gleaming under the bulb's light. With memories from my previous life, I naturally didn't crave such things. But why should I let that pretty boy have it for free? I gave a faint smile. Isn't he supposed to be an overseas returned elite? Why is he even taking postgraduate exams? If my education is low, shouldn't I be the one needing to study more? A guilty look flashed across Evelyn's face. Obviously, she knew it was her pressure that had led to my being laid off. I needed learning opportunities more than Marcus did. But she hedged, her voice sharpening. Don't worry about it now. Wait until next month's paycheck and buy one yourself, okay? What about the coupons? I shot back. You need coupons to buy electronics, right? Evelyn fell silent, her cheeks flushing slightly. In this era, TV coupons were worth more than money. They were only issued to the factory's regular employees, loyal workers like me, until today. Under Auntie Wang's scrutinizing stare, Evelyn still couldn't bring herself to look pleased. She turned to Marcus. Marcus, your television, let me see if I can get you one later, all right? The smile vanished from Marcus's face, his jaw tightening. He unplugged the TV himself and dragged it to the yard, his expression sour, muscles straining under the weight. If Victor doesn't want the gift, then I won't bother wasting money on you anymore. With that, he slammed the door shut, the bang echoing through the alley. After he left, Evelyn's face was terrifyingly ugly. Are you satisfied now? We're fighting over a TV, when did you get so petty? I ignored her and quickly turned on the set, flicking to the state news broadcast. That channel was full of future business opportunities, hints of economic reforms, foreign investments, the opening of special zones in the South. I watched intently, the black and white images flickering like promises. Seeing me pay no attention, Evelyn grew angrier and stood up to block the screen, her shadow falling over the tube. I warn you, since you snatched the television, the chance to stay at the factory must go to Marcus. That remark piqued my interest. I hadn't even pressed her, and she'd already walked into the line of fire herself. Chapter 4. Since you brought it up, Team Leader Wu, let me ask you this, in terms of performance, seniority, and skill, I'm far stronger than that Marcus in every way, so why am I the one being laid off? Evelyn immediately grew displeased, her face full of annoyance as she looked at me, arms crossed over her chest. What else could it be? Even if you're laid off, once we're married, my salary will be enough for the two of us to live on. Marcus just returned to the country and doesn't know his way around. If he gets laid off, he'll have a hard time. Can't you show a little compassion? I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Do I look so desperate to live off someone else's support? Clearly, I had the ability to live a good life on my own. Yet she'd unilaterally arranged for me to lose my job and insisted on supporting me with her wages. Words of argument rose to my lips, then I swallowed them back. There was no point in debating with someone whose mind was already made up. Receiving no response from me, Evelyn assumed I agreed, and her expression relaxed noticeably, a small smile tugging at her lips. Starting next month, I'll give you 10 yuan a month for living expenses. The rest I'll lend to Marcus, he's just returned and isn't used to domestic food. A sardonic smile flickered in my mind, though my face showed nothing. Just a few months, once he adapts, that will be it. I still didn't argue. No use saying more. She said it was a loan, but she probably never intended to be repaid. Besides, she would have to give him children, go through confinement, raise the child, the debts would only pile up. But if two people consent, that's their business, not mine. Do whatever you want, I stated my stance flatly. Evelyn, rare as it was, showed me a gentle smile, her eyes softening for a moment. If you're willing to understand, that's perfect. Marcus and I grew up in the same compound. I can't stand by while he's in trouble, right? I watched the TV without raising my eyelids and replied, you care so much for him, are you saying if he wants to have a child, you'd be willing to help with that too? Evelyn reacted as if I'd hit a sore spot and abruptly raised her voice, her face flushing red. What nonsense are you spouting? If you say that again, don't blame me for turning against you. The conversation ended in discord, the air thick with unspoken accusations. I didn't pay it much mind, after all, I'd lost my job, and my immediate priority was to find a way to earn money. Neighbors who heard about my layoff came to offer consolation, knocking on the door with sympathetic nods. It's fine. Evelyn has the means, she can support the family by herself. Evelyn lived up to her words and handed me 10 yuan the next day, crisp bills folded neatly. Then she brazenly moved into Marcus's house, her footsteps light as she carried her belongings across the yard. Through the not very high courtyard wall, Marcus's gentle voice carried clearly into my yard. Evelyn, I cut up some fruit, come taste it. Evelyn, do you have clothes to wash? I'll wash them for you. Evelyn, I'm not keen on going to the factory tomorrow, why don't you take the day off too, and we can go out together. Evelyn's saccharine voice mingled with his, laughter drifting like smoke. I pretended not to hear and focused on my own tasks, cleaning the house, mending clothes, planning my next move. One day, I told myself, I would leave this place. While packing clothes into a bundle, I found 2 brand new dresses pressed at the bottom of the wardrobe. For a moment, the calm surface of my heart rippled. I had bought those for Evelyn back when I first started working, saving every penny from my meager wages. But she had never worn them, not even once, not a wrinkle anywhere on the fabric. She had never even touched them. What a waste. Might as well sell them. As I thought that, another idea flashed through my mind. In my previous life, right after Evelyn and I got married, a new clothing trend had swept across the country. Fitted collared shirts had been in such demand that supply couldn't keep up. I could easily get ahead this time, buy stock in advance, sell it on the market, and seize the opportunity. I acted immediately, pulling out my piggy bank hidden under the floorboards. Inside was 500 yuan, all my savings, accumulated through years of frugality. The coins and bills felt heavy in my hand, a tangible promise of change. I went straight south to the wholesale markets, the journey by bus rattling through dusty roads, my mind racing with possibilities. Chapter 5. When I came back with the goods, Evelyn unusually had returned home. She stood in the doorway, blocking my path, her arms crossed and a deep frown on her face. The late afternoon sun silhouetted her figure, making her seem taller, more imposing. "Where have you been these past few days?" she asked, her voice sharp with accusation, as if my absence was a personal affront to her. I ignored her and kept sorting the bundles of shirts I'd brought back from the south. The fabrics were crisp and new, smelling of dye and opportunity. I laid them out on the wooden table, checking for any damages from the long journey. She walked into the kitchen, her frown deepening at the dusty counters and the empty stove. "You didn't even cook." How laughable. She who hadn't come home for half a month dared to ask such a thing. In my previous life, her words would have been a knife to the heart, a reminder of my failure to be the husband she wanted. Now, they were just noise. When I kept silent, she grew angrier and yanked a shirt from my hands, the fabric crinkling under her tight grip. "You're at home now, and you can't even cook a meal." I shot her a cold look, my eyes meeting hers for the first time since she'd arrived. "If you want meals or tantrums, go next door. I don't have time to indulge you." Evelyn's face changed, a flicker of shock crossing her features before she hardened them again. She opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it, shifting the topic after a pause. "Aren't you supposed to be studying? What's the point of fussing over clothes?" Her voice dripped with disdain. Clearly, as a so-called top student, she looked down on such menial, commercial things. She had no idea that the talk about exams was just my excuse to take back the television. I'd long known in my past life that I wasn't cut out for studying. It's important to know yourself. Seeing that she was about to keep nagging, her lectures on self-improvement already forming on her lips, I set the clothes down impatiently. "If you've got time to waste, why don't you check next door?" I heard clanging all afternoon, no idea what they're up to. Though the place was now quiet, Evelyn jumped up at the mention of Marcus and dashed out immediately, her steps quick and anxious, the screen door slamming shut behind her. I thought I'd finally get some peace, but to my surprise, she soon came running back, her face flushed with a strange mix of urgency and unease. That shocked me. Usually, she couldn't wait to stay away all year, so why was she going back and forth today? The next moment, her words answered my question. "My mom called," she said, her voice breathless. "She heard you got laid off and wants us to get married quickly." I had planned to speak to Mrs. Wu in a while about calling off the engagement. I hadn't expected she'd already grown impatient. I kept silent, waiting for Evelyn's conditions, knowing they were coming. Sure enough, after hesitating a while, she lowered her voice, avoiding my gaze. "Could you tell Mom to delay the wedding until next year? I really don't have the time right now." I sneered inwardly. Juggling two men, how could she have time? She wanted to keep me as her fiancé on paper, a shield against her mother's questions, while she built a life with Marcus. She wanted the stability of our engagement without any of the commitment. But I didn't bother to expose her. Her hypocrisy was her own problem, not mine. I nodded, my expression neutral. "Fine. Tomorrow I'll explain it clearly to Auntie Wu." At my words, Evelyn instantly relaxed, her shoulders slumping in relief. Her expression eased, and she even hummed a little tune as she left, her steps light and quick. Soon after, I heard the door next door open and close again, softly this time, as if she were returning to a sanctuary. I drew a long breath, a cold smile tugging at my lips as I watched the last of the evening light fade from the sky. Of course, I would go to Mrs. Wu. But not to postpone the wedding. To rid myself of you once and for all, Evelyn. Chapter 6. The next day, just as the sky was turning a pale, milky gray, I got out of bed. The labor market stalls hadn't yet been reorganized by the city authorities. If you went late, you'd miss out on the best spots, the ones with the most foot traffic. After a simple bite of a steamed bun and a cup of hot water, I slung my bundle over my shoulder. Inside, besides the wholesale clothes, were also the dresses I had once bought for Evelyn. Before leaving, I also took with me the silver coins Mrs. Wu had given me when we got engaged, 2 heavy, intricately carved pieces that felt cold in my palm. They were a symbol of a promise I no longer intended to keep. Just as I was about to step out, Evelyn returned. Shockingly, she had breakfast in her hands, a small bamboo steamer with hot buns and a bowl of porridge. Seeing me with my bundle, her brows furrowed. "So early, where are you going?" I was curious too. Normally, she ate breakfast with Marcus, their quiet morning rituals a staple of the alley's gossip. But I couldn't be bothered to ask. I just said, "I have something to do," and moved to leave. She suddenly ran over and grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "So early, what could you have to do?" "Eat first." Marcus made this especially. I let out a mocking laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet morning air. Whether he put effort into it or not, what does that have to do with me? At my tone, Evelyn, for once, didn't get angry but sighed, her shoulders slumping. I thought it over. "Letting you face my mother alone isn't right. After breakfast, we'll go together." I shot back without thinking, afraid I'll change my mind at the last minute. Her pupils shrank, her hand tightening on my arm. She didn't dare meet my eyes and muttered in defense, "No. I just don't want you to get lost. I'll take you." Over the past 2 years, I delivered food to her mother countless times. Evelyn knew this. Yet she used such a clumsy, transparent excuse. Clearly, Marcus must have said something to her last night, planted a seed of doubt. That was why she worried I'd change my decision. The sky was brightening, and I grew anxious. If I wasted more time with her, I'd lose my spot at the stalls. The morning rush was everything. I yanked my arm free, my patience finally gone. "No need. I can find the way. If you're so worried, ask your mother after I get back." I strode off without looking back, my boots crunching on the gravel path. Behind me came her call, "You're not eating breakfast." I ignored it. I'm a man, not a dog. Just because she feels like throwing me a bone, do I have to wag my tail and play along? On the way to the market, excitement and nerves churned in me. They called it a market, but it was more like a black market, a chaotic, unofficial gathering of vendors at the edge of town, where entrepreneurs and hustlers tested the new economic freedoms. Stalls weren't officially allowed here, and the risk of being shut down by the authorities was always present. Luckily, everything went smoothly. The shirts, with their fitted cuts and modern collars, were a novelty. Even though my clothes were pricey compared to the drab, standard-issue garments sold elsewhere, they were in hot demand. In no time, they were sold out, the cash box filling with crumpled bills. Looking at the 300 yuan in my hands, I was thrilled. Pure profit, almost as much as a year's wages at the factory. This was real. This was the future. Right after, I went to see Mrs. Wu. Standing at her door, a familiar feeling of nervousness washed over me. After all, Mrs. Wu had always treated me kindly, with loyalty and affection. She was the one who had arranged the engagement and often said she hoped Evelyn and I would live well together. She treated me almost like her own son, always making sure I had enough to eat, always asking about my work. But this time, I no longer wanted to be her son-in-law. When I entered, her face lit up with a warm smile, the wrinkles around her eyes crinkling with pleasure. But once I said I was there to break off the engagement, her smile vanished, replaced by anger. Her teacup clattered against the saucer. That wretched girl, was this her idea? She made you lose your job, and now she wants to break the engagement too. Outrageous. She glared at me, her voice trembling with indignation. "Don't worry, Victor. I'll scold her myself." I shook my head with a smile, my heart aching with a strange mix of guilt and resolve. "Auntie Wu, it's not about her. I don't want to marry her." Mrs. Wu froze, her mouth slightly agape. She couldn't believe those words came from me. That only proved that deep down, she, too, thought marrying her daughter was above my station. "Victor, are you serious?" My smile didn't falter. "Yes, Auntie. I don't want to live here anymore. I plan to head south and build a career. If I marry, I'll have ties holding me back. A man must fight for his future." Mrs. Wu was silent, her eyes searching me with doubt, as if trying to understand the sudden change in the quiet, accommodating boy she had known for years. But after a while, she nodded slowly in understanding. Just as I expected. If I'd said I was breaking the engagement because of Evelyn, she wouldn't have been able to accept it. But since I made it about myself, about a young man's ambition, she had no choice but to agree. Seeing her nod, I took the silver coins from my bag and handed them back. "Auntie, I can't take these. Also, I have one request. I may need to stay in that house temporarily. But don't worry, I'll move out soon. And as for breaking the engagement, I'll tell her myself." Mrs. Wu's eyes were full of pity and guilt. She agreed immediately, without hesitation. "All right. Don't worry about the house, from now on, that's your home." I shook my head and gave a faint laugh. A place with Evelyn in it, how could that ever be called home? Chapter 7. By the time I got home, night had already fallen. The house was pitch dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of street lamps filtering through the paper windows. Next door, however, shone brightly with light, laughter and the clink of dishes spilling out into the alley like an unwelcome invitation. As soon as I stepped into my room and turned on the lamp, the harsh bulb flickering to life, I heard footsteps from next door. Moments later, Evelyn pushed open the door and walked in without knocking, her face a mask of forced casualness. "You're back. Did you talk to my mom today?" I ignored her, busy jotting numbers in my notebook. The pencil scratched softly against the paper as I tallied the day's earnings, 300 yuan, minus the cost of the shirts, leaving a tidy profit. When I left Mrs. Wu's place, she had slipped me a note with names and addresses, her old classmates now working in the south who could lend me a hand. I counted my savings again. If I earned just a little more, I'd be able to head south to Guangzhou. The thought filled me with excitement, the corners of my lips curling upward without my realizing. Only then did I notice Evelyn standing there, her arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. Our eyes met, and her brows furrowed. "Didn't you hear me talking to you? Did you tell my mom today?" "Don't worry," I said, my voice calm and even. I told her, and she agreed. Evelyn stared at me for a few seconds, then her expression softened, a relieved sigh escaping her. She nodded, stepping closer. "This time, it's been hard on you. In the future, I'll make it up to you." No sooner had she spoken than the door burst open again. Marcus entered without invitation, his frame filling the doorway. Seeing Evelyn so close to me, displeasure flashed across his face, his jaw clenching. "Evelyn, why are you still here so late? Why not go home?" Home. The word made me want to laugh. This was originally Evelyn's home, and yet she couldn't bring herself to stay in her own house. She treated it like a temporary shelter, a place to store her things while she built her real life next door. "I'll be back soon, don't worry." Evelyn's face was full of tenderness as she walked to his side, soothing him softly with a hand on his arm before returning to sit down on the edge of my bed, uninvited. Marcus took a seat in the only chair, his gaze sweeping the room like he owned it. When he spotted the remaining clothes I'd bought wholesale, his eyes lit up with opportunistic greed. "Victor, these clothes look nice. You bought them." Evelyn frowned beside him, her tone dismissive. "Exactly. Why'd you buy so many? Got extra money lying around?" I said nothing, just gathered the clothes together into neat stacks, folding them carefully to avoid wrinkles. But Marcus seemed to have thought of something. A smile tugged at his lips, sly and calculating. "Evelyn, I'm new here and don't know the market well. It's easy to get ripped off. Since Victor has so many clothes, why don't we ask him to give me a few?" "No problem," Evelyn agreed instantly, then turned and pressed me with her eyes, expectant. "You won't wear them anyway. Pick out some for Marcus later." My brow furrowed, disgust welling up inside me like bile. I hadn't wanted to waste words with them. But since they insisted on trampling over me, I no longer bothered with courtesy. The air in the room grew thick, the neighbors' murmurs filtering through the thin walls, Auntie Wang whispering to her husband about the drama next door. I pointed straight at the door, my voice steady but laced with steel. "Take your pretty boy, and get out." Evelyn froze. It was the first time I had ever spoken to her in that tone, direct, unyielding, without the deference she'd always taken for granted. She sat there, staring blankly at me, her eyes slowly reddening as if trying to figure out whether I had been possessed by some spirit. At last, it was Marcus who broke the silence. Looking aggrieved, he said, "Since Victor doesn't welcome me, I'll leave first." He rose deliberately slowly, his movements theatrical, and walked toward the door, pausing to glance back at Evelyn expectantly. But Evelyn didn't stop him. She just kept staring straight at me, as if she hadn't even heard him, her mind elsewhere. At the doorway, Marcus finally couldn't take it anymore. He turned his head to look at her, his voice edged with irritation. "Evelyn." She snapped back to herself but still didn't look at him, only said offhandedly, "You go ahead." Marcus's face darkened, a storm brewing in his eyes. He seemed to want to say more, but in the end, he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the silence. That left only Evelyn and me in the room. The atmosphere grew heavy and oppressive, the lamp's light casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Neither of us spoke. After a long time, Evelyn couldn't hold back. She drew in a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. "I really don't understand why you have to target Marcus in everything. His parents died early. He studied abroad all alone, it hasn't been easy for him. You've even been neighbors for years. Can't you show some mutual support?" I let out a cold laugh, the sound cutting through the tension. "So what are you saying? That I killed his parents? Why should I yield to him in everything?" Evelyn's expression turned even uglier. She glared at me, her voice ice cold, rising in pitch. "Victor, are you even a man? Can't you be more generous?" I laughed and shot back, my words sharp as a blade. "My fiancé spends every night at his house, and I'm not generous enough." Evelyn erupted, springing to her feet, her voice sharp and echoing off the walls. "Don't talk nonsense. Marcus and I are clean, we've never done anything." I brushed it off with a casual tone, leaning back in my chair. I didn't care to argue, nor did I need to. When there's already a child, what's the point of talking about being clean? Ridiculous. But it didn't matter to me. The conversation ended badly. Evelyn stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Fortunately, once she was gone, the place was peaceful again, the only sound the distant hum of the neighborhood settling into night. The next morning, just as I was leaving for the market, I heard the steady breathing of Evelyn sleeping next door. It surprised me, she must have stayed up late arguing with Marcus, but I didn't dwell on it and went out anyway. For the next month, I left early and came back late. Life was steady and busy, a rhythm of bargaining, sewing, and saving. The only unusual thing was that Evelyn began coming home more often. Sometimes she even brought boxed meals, setting them on the table without a word. My attitude, however, stayed the same, I ignored her. Every time, her face showed complicated emotions, confusion, guilt, perhaps a hint of regret, before she quietly left. I thought she went to be with Marcus, but several times when I opened the door, she was just sitting in the living room in a daze, staring at the wall as if lost in thought. I didn't bother with her, focusing instead on my own work. Marcus, on the other hand, sometimes deliberately made loud noises next door, trying to show off, clattering pots, laughing too loudly. Evelyn would rush over, but soon she would return, her face drawn. This strange state of affairs continued for 2 months, a fragile truce hanging in the air. Chapter 8. Then one afternoon, while I was napping in my room to escape the midday heat, the door suddenly slammed open, crashing against the wall with a dull bang that jolted me awake. I had just opened my eyes when Evelyn stormed in with a basin of cold water and splashed it all over me, the icy liquid soaking my clothes and bedding. "You damned bastard. I didn't want to have conflicts with you, but you've gone too far, spreading rumors about Marcus all over the factory, even sabotaging his bicycle so he broke his leg. You're vicious beyond belief." The icy shock left my head a little blank, all I could hear was her frantic screaming in my ears, her face twisted in rage, water dripping from her hands. I forced myself up, shoving her aside with a firm push. "Are you out of your mind?" I snapped, my voice rising for the first time in weeks. "I haven't even been to the factory these days, and I certainly never went into Marcus's yard. What evidence do you have that I did any of those things?" Evelyn's face filled with malice, her voice sharp and unrelenting. "Still denying it? Auntie Wong at the alley entrance saw you were messing with Marcus's bicycle yesterday. My frown deepened. Last night, on my way home from the market, I had indeed run into Marcus at the alley mouth. He was pushing his bike, complaining that the chain had come off, and asked if I could fix it. I hadn't paid him any mind and walked off, my bundle heavy on my shoulder. Now they were pinning this on me, twisting a simple refusal into sabotage. I stared coldly into her eyes, water still trickling down my neck. I'm a clean man and fear no slander. If you want to smear me, think again. With that, I shoved past her, stormed out of the yard, and kicked open Marcus's door. Evelyn, who had rushed after me, was startled and tried to stop me, grabbing at my sleeve. Victor, don't. But I didn't care. I went straight to Marcus's bedside. He was curled on the bed, clutching his leg and howling in pain, a crude bandage wrapped around his ankle. Seeing me, his face went pale with panic, his eyes widening. Who told you to come? Don't come near me. I sneered and closed the distance, then raised my hand and struck him hard across the face, the slap echoing like a crack of thunder. His cheek reddened instantly, and he recoiled, stunned. You shameless dog, you asked for it, so don't blame me for being ruthless. Evelyn, who had followed in, screamed and shoved me away, her nails digging into my arm. You're insane, Victor. You actually struck someone. Watching her furious reaction, I couldn't help but smirk, wiping my hand on my wet shirt. First of all, let me make clear, I didn't hit a person. Secondly, he started it, if he got hit, he deserved it. Evelyn, open your damn eyes, those 2 slaps just now were his doing. Evelyn had never seen this ferocity in me before, she stood frozen, speechless, her mouth agape. In my previous life, I had always tolerated everything and borne all the grievances for her. This life, how could I possibly put myself through that again? Marcus clutched his swollen cheek, cowering by the foot of the bed, too afraid to speak, his earlier smugness evaporated. Evelyn could only hold him with a face full of pity and whisper comforting words, stroking his hair. I'm sorry, I'm late. Then she turned and yelled at me, her voice breaking. Hurry up and apologize to Marcus. I replied coldly, turning on my heel. Apologize? Apologize my ass. If he hadn't asked for his own trouble, he wouldn't have gotten hit. After that incident, Evelyn moved her luggage straight into Marcus's house. From that day on, she never said a single word to me, as if in her eyes, this silent treatment was a way of punishing me. What she didn't realize was that I actually enjoyed this kind of life. The house was quieter, my focus sharper. No more interruptions, no more games. But while I ignored them, Marcus wasn't satisfied. Once again, he swaggered over to show off, leaning against my doorway with a cup of coffee in hand, his eyes brimmed with smugness. The aroma was rich and foreign, wafting into the room. This is imported civet coffee, he said with a mocking tone, lifting the cup to his lips. Evelyn got it especially to make it up to me. I bet some people here have never even smelled it before, huh? He took a delicate sip, his expression one of indulgent bliss, savoring the moment. You probably don't know, do you? She's carrying my child now. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper, laced with triumph. Victor, her body and her heart belong to me. What right do you have to compete with me anymore? His face twisted with malice, bearing none of the so-called gentlemanly charm he once paraded. At that moment, I finally understood something, whether in my previous life or in this one, I was never the one unworthy of Evelyn. Rather, it was a woman like her, devoid of any sense of morality, who deserved a scoundrel like him. I looked at him calmly, my voice even. I won't fight you for her. Congratulations, you've won yourself a worthless woman. My composure caught Marcus off guard. He stared at me wide-eyed, utterly puzzled. What do you mean by that? I didn't bother explaining. Smiling faintly, I returned to my room, closing the door on his confusion. The next day, I bought my train ticket south. Departure, 2 days later. As I held that ticket in my hand, my heart surged with anticipation, a ticket not just to a new city, but to a new life. I packed my things, selling or giving away whatever I could. By the time I was done, the room was stripped bare aside from the furniture, with no trace that anyone had ever lived there. The dresses, sold for a small sum, the notebooks, tucked away, the past, finally discarded. When I finally boarded that train, a sense of freedom and ease washed over me like never before. The whistle blew, the wheels clattered, and the town faded into the distance. 2 days and 2 nights later, I stepped onto the sweltering soil of Guangzhou, the humid air thick with possibility. Chapter 9, Mrs. Wu's Parlor. The air in Mrs. Wu's parlor smelled of camphor wood and decades of careful living. Framed photographs lined the walls, her husband in his youth, Evelyn as a bright-eyed girl in a school uniform, and one I'd never seen, a young man with Marcus Zhang's sharp jawline, standing beside an older couple identified in faded ink as Marcus's parents. The resemblance was unmistakable. Mrs. Wu poured tea into 2 porcelain cups, her movements deliberate. When I sat, the chair creaked like an old memory. "Victor," she began, her voice softer than I expected. "Evelyn told me you came to break things off. She's distraught. Says you've changed." I stirred my tea, watching leaves swirl. "I haven't changed, Auntie. She just never saw who I was." Her knuckles whitened on the teapot. "You know why this engagement existed? Your mother and I, we were sisters. When your parents died, I took responsibility. But responsibility isn't love. Evelyn, she's always been willful." A photograph caught my eye, Marcus at 18, accepting a trophy. Mrs. Wu followed my gaze. His parents died when he was 10. Sent him abroad on scholarship. Hardship makes some men noble, others bitter. She met my eyes squarely. "Which is he now?" I thought of the slap echoing in Marcus's room, of Evelyn's tears afterward. "Bitter," I said silently. Aloud, "He wanted my job, my house, my reputation. Now he has them. Why cry over spilt tea?" She sighed, a sound full of years. "When I gave you those silver coins at the engagement ceremony, it was a wish that you'd build something lasting together. But wishes aren't chains." Her fingers brushed the embroidered lotus on my sleeve, the same pattern as the dowry coin's edge. "Take them back. You earned their weight." I shook my head. "They belong to the past. Like this house." Rising, I placed the untouched teacup on her table. "Thank you for shelter. But my foundation starts where that train goes south." As I left, she called after me, "If you ever need papers signed, or witnesses." Her smile was thin but honest. "Don't be a stranger." I didn't turn back. A home built on obligation was still a cage. Chapter 10, The Unpacked Suitcase. That night, I unpacked the suitcase I'd carried from the factory dormitory. Beneath the folded shirts destined for Guangzhou's markets lay 2 parcels wrapped in brown paper. Inside were the dresses I'd bought for Evelyn 5 years prior, emerald silk, midnight wool, both tags unbroken. I ran a thumb over the emerald silk's collar. In my last life, I'd hung these in her closet, hoping she'd wear them to our anniversary dinners. She never did. They grew yellow with neglect, like our marriage. Now, I held them up against the fading light. Who would buy these? Not working women, they wore drab cotton. Not students, they had no money. Then I remembered the wives of cadres, the secretaries, the teachers moonlighting as tutors. Women who craved beauty but feared being seen. I spread the dresses on my narrow cot. Silk catches light differently than factory polyester. These weren't clothes, they were rebellion. The next morning, I visited every fabric stall between the train station and Shiguan Market. By noon, I'd traded them for bolt after bolt of imported nylon, lightweight, wrinkle-proof, perfect for blouses that would sell 10 times faster than my own labor ever had. As I lugged the rolls through the crowded streets, a newspaper vendor's shout cut through the humidity, "Special economic zones approved. Shenzhen, Zhuhai, factories invited." My steps slowed. The southern boom wasn't coming. It was here. That evening, while counting profits by lamplight, a shadow fell across my doorway. Marcus Zhang stood there, silk shirt damp with sweat, holding a tin of expensive biscuits. His smile was a blade sheathed in velvet. "Victor. Heard you're leaving soon." He tossed the tin onto my table. "For the road. Imported from Hong Kong." I didn't touch it. Generous. Or guilty. His smile faltered. "Evelyn worries you'll struggle down south. She says you're too proud to take charity." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Tell her pride doesn't fill bellies. Ambition does." He leaned in, his voice dropping. Ambition without connection starves. Ask your auntie if she'd write you a reference. Or do you still believe favors are free? I picked up the tin and handed it back, my fingertips brushing his. The only favor I want is never seeing your face again. Marcus's eyes narrowed. For the first time, the polished mask slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. Be careful what you burn, Victor. Fire spreads fast in dry alleys. He left. I lit a match and dropped it into the tin. The biscuits flared gold and black in seconds, a small pyre for dead hopes. Outside, rain began to fall, first drops sizzling on the hot tin roof. A southern storm. Perfect timing. Chapter 11, The Market Stall. The morning air in Guangzhou was thick with the scent of frying dough and diesel fumes. I arrived at the wholesale market before dawn, the nylon fabric rolls heavy on my shoulder. The stall owner, a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth named Old Chen, squinted at my factory ID. Northern Textile Mill, eh? We don't get many of you down here. He spat on the ground. Your spot's in the back. Don't block the walkway. That spot was a patch of cracked concrete barely wide enough for my folding table. But it was mine. As the sun rose, the market came alive, merchants shouting prices, carts rattling over cobblestones, the electric hum of sewing machines from nearby workshops. I laid out my first batch of collared shirts. The fabric was stiffer than I'd hoped, but the cut was modern, the colors bright. For hours, people passed without stopping. Then a woman in a well-tailored suit paused, her eyes sharp. Let me see the blue one, she said in crisp Mandarin. She examined the stitching, held it up to the light. Your work. My design, I said. The workshop is nearby. She bought 3. Then another customer stopped, then another. By noon, my table was half empty, my money belt heavy with bills. This was different from the factory. Here, every sale was a choice, not an assignment. During a lull, a young man approached. He couldn't have been older than 20, with ink-stained fingers and hungry eyes. Your shirts, he said. They're good. But the collar is wrong for the South. Too high, too stiff. People want to breathe here. He was right. I'd been copying Northern designs, not understanding Southern needs. I'm studying textiles at the university, he continued. I could help. For a share of the profits. I looked at his earnest face, the textbook peeking from his bag. In my previous life, I would have dismissed him. Now, I saw an opportunity. Show me, I said. He sketched a new design on a scrap of paper, wider collar, lighter fabric, subtle pattern. It was better. It was Southern. We shook hands. His name was David, and he became my first employee. Chapter 12, The Midnight Knocking. The knocking came late, when the market had gone quiet and only the stray cats moved through the alleys. I was counting the day's earnings when the sound echoed through my small rented room, not the polite tap of a neighbor, but the hard rap of authority. 2 men stood in the doorway. The older one wore a security bureau uniform, the younger held a clipboard. Victor Chen. We have questions about your business license. My heart hammered, but I kept my face calm. I have a temporary vendor permit. The permit is for retail, not manufacturing, the younger man said. We received a complaint about unregistered workshop activity. Marcus. It had to be. He'd warned me about burning bridges. The older officer stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room, the sewing machine in the corner, the fabric stacks, the account books on the table. Running a factory without approval is a serious matter, he said. We could shut you down. Fine you heavily. I poured 2 cups of tea, my hands steady. This isn't a factory. It's a sample room. I'm developing designs for Northern manufacturers. It was a risk, a lie that could bury me if discovered. But the truth would end everything. The older man sipped his tea, his eyes on mine. My nephew works at your old mill. He says you were one of their best. Why leave? The world is changing, I said. I want to change with it. He set down the cup. I'll be back in 1 week. Have proper documentation by then. Or don't be here. After they left, I sat in the dark, the taste of fear sharp in my mouth. Proper documentation meant bribes, connections, things I didn't have. But giving up meant returning to Evelyn's shadow, to Marcus's smug smile. David came the next morning, his face grim. I heard. My uncle knows someone in the Commerce Bureau. It won't be cheap, but I'll find the money, I said. We worked through the day and night, sewing not for profit but for survival. Each shirt became a stitch holding my future together. Chapter 13, The First Shipment. The truck arrived at dawn, its diesel engine rattling the windows. David stood beside me, both of us watching as workers loaded the final boxes. 300 shirts, he said. To a store in Shanghai. I never thought. I knew the feeling. In my previous life, I'd measured success in factory quotas and supervisor approval. Now success was a signed contract, a truck heading north with goods I'd created. The driver handed me the shipping documents. You're the owner? I nodded, the word still foreign on my tongue. Yes. As the truck pulled away, David turned to me, his expression serious. There's something you should know. I asked around about who reported you to the authorities. I already knew, but I let him speak. It wasn't Marcus Zhang, he said. It was Evelyn Wu. The world tilted. Evelyn. She came to Guangzhou last week. Met with officials. David showed me a restaurant receipt he'd found, Evelyn's signature next to a bureaucrat's name. She told them you were operating illegally, that you'd stolen designs from the factory. The betrayal cut deeper than Marcus's petty schemes. This was calculated, personal. She wasn't just trying to stop my business, she was trying to destroy my reputation. Why? The word escaped before I could stop it. David looked away. There are rumors. She's pregnant. Marcus's child. She needs to secure his position at the factory, prove he's more reliable than you. I thought of the baby she'd claimed to have adopted in my previous life, the child I'd raised as my own. History was repeating itself, but this time, I held the pen. Let her try, I said, my voice cold. I'm not the man I was. That afternoon, I visited the Commerce Bureau alone. The official behind the desk was the same young man who'd threatened to shut me down. I have the documentation, I said, placing the papers on his desk. He scanned them, his eyebrows rising. These are in order. How did you? I have friends in the north, I said. It was true, Mrs. Wu's contacts had come through, her signature opening doors Evelyn couldn't close. As I left, the official called after me. Your former factory, they're struggling. Layoffs coming. You chose the right time to leave. I didn't answer. The factory, Evelyn, Marcus, they were ghosts from another life. My future was here, in this humid southern city, with its crowded markets and endless possibilities. That night, I wrote 2 letters. One to Mrs. Wu, thanking her. One to Evelyn, a single sentence, the world is big enough for both of us. Stay out of my way. I didn't send the second one. Some bridges are better burned. Chapter 14, The Bicycle Incident. The air in the alley had grown thick with unspoken accusations. I returned from the market one evening to find a small crowd gathered around Marcus's doorway. Evelyn stood at the center, her face pale, pointing at a bicycle lying on its side, its front wheel bent at an unnatural angle. He did this, she declared to anyone who would listen. Victor sabotaged Marcus's bicycle. He's been jealous ever since Marcus returned. Auntie Wang stood nearby, wringing her hands. I saw Victor near the bicycle yesterday evening, she admitted reluctantly. But I didn't see him touch it. I pushed through the gathering neighbors, my market bags still heavy with unsold samples. What's this about? Marcus emerged from the house, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch, his left ankle wrapped in bandages. My bicycle was tampered with, he said, his voice tight with pain. The front wheel came loose while I was riding home from the factory. The doctor says I'll be out of work for weeks. Evelyn turned on me, her eyes blazing. You've been hostile toward Marcus since he arrived. First you take back the television, then you refuse to share your clothing stock, and now this. I set down my bags slowly, deliberately. I had no reason to touch his bicycle. I have my own business to run. But you were seen near it. Evelyn insisted. I walk past that bicycle every day, I countered. Just as you do. Just as every neighbor here does. That proves nothing. Old Manly from across the alley spoke up. I saw Marcus riding that bicycle home last night. The wheel was already wobbling then. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Evelyn's certainty wavered, but only for a moment. Even if you didn't physically break it, she said, her voice dropping, you've created this atmosphere of hostility. You've made Marcus feel unwelcome in his own neighborhood. I looked from her furious face to Marcus's pained expression, and something in me snapped. The memories of my previous life, of their deception, of the child I raised thinking he was mine, of dying alone in that hospital bed, rose up like bile. Unwelcome. I repeated softly. Then I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made several neighbors step back. He's been welcome in your bed, in your home, in your heart. What more welcome does he need? The alley fell silent. Even the cicadas seemed to stop their buzzing. Evelyn's face went from pale to deep red. How dare you? I dare because I'm tired of the pretense. I shot back. Tired of being the fool who provides stability while you play house with another man. Tired of everyone in this alley knowing the truth but pretending otherwise. I turned to address the gathered neighbors. Yes, I was laid off from the factory. And yes, Evelyn arranged it so Marcus could keep his position. She gives him money from her salary while offering me 10 yuan a month like I'm a beggar. And now she carries his child while still wearing my engagement ring. The revelation hung in the air, tangible as the evening humidity. Auntie Wang looked away, ashamed. Others exchanged knowing glances, they'd suspected, but never had it been spoken aloud. Evelyn looked like she'd been struck. You've gone mad, she whispered. Have I? I asked. Or have I simply stopped pretending? Marcus tried to step forward, but winced as he put weight on his injured ankle. This is between you and Evelyn, he said. There's no need to air private matters publicly. Private. I laughed again. You made it public when you accused me of sabotage. You made it public when you moved into the house next door and started playing husband and wife for all the alley to see. I picked up my market bags. I didn't touch your bicycle, Marcus. But I won't waste another breath defending myself to people who've already decided I'm the villain in their story. As I turned to leave, Evelyn found her voice again. Where are you going? We're not finished. Oh, we're finished, I said without looking back. We were finished before we began. Chapter 15, The Slap That Echoed. 3 days after the bicycle incident, I returned from another successful market day to find Evelyn waiting inside my home. She'd let herself in, a privilege she'd always taken for granted. We need to talk, she said, her arms crossed. I have nothing to say to you. You will listen, she snapped. Because of your outburst, the whole factory is talking. People are looking at me differently. Mother is asking questions I can't answer. I began unpacking my bags, ignoring her. This only infuriated her more. Look at me when I'm speaking to you, she demanded, grabbing my arm. I shook her off. You lost the right to make demands on me when you gave my job to your lover. He's not my lover, she shouted, then immediately looked away, unable to hold my gaze. Aren't you pregnant with his child? I asked quietly. The question hung between us. She didn't deny it. These things happen, she said finally, her voice strained. Marcus and I have a connection you could never understand. We grew up together, we understand each other. And what are we? I interrupted. What was this engagement? A convenience? A joke? It was my mother's idea, she cried. I never wanted it. I never wanted you. The words, though expected, still landed with physical force. In my previous life, they would have shattered me. Now, they just confirmed what I already knew. Then we're in agreement, I said calmly. Because I don't want you either. I turned back to my unpacking, but she wasn't done. You think you're so clever with your little market business, she sneered. Selling cheap shirts to peasants. Do you really think that compares to what Marcus is building? He's going to be department head at the factory. He has prospects. You have, what? A folding table and some fabric scraps. I continued my work, saying nothing. My silence seemed to infuriate her more than any argument could. "Answer me," she screamed, and before I could react, she picked up a basin of washing water from the corner and threw it at me. The cold water soaked through my clothes, dripping onto the floor. For a long moment, I just stood there, water pooling around my feet. Then I walked out the door. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "We're not done." I didn't answer. I went straight to Marcus's door and kicked it open. Marcus was sitting on his bed, his injured ankle propped up. He looked up in surprise, then fear as he saw my expression. "Victor, what?" I didn't let him finish. I crossed the room in 3 strides and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed in the small room. Evelyn came running in behind me. "Have you gone completely mad?" I turned to her, water still dripping from my clothes. "You want to throw water? You want to scream and accuse? Fine. But understand this, every action has consequences." I pointed at Marcus, who was clutching his reddening cheek. "He wanted my job. He has it. He wanted you. He has you. But he doesn't get to play the victim while stealing everything I worked for." Marcus found his voice, though it trembled. "I never asked for any of this." "Didn't you?" I asked. "You accepted the job. You accepted her money. You accepted her bed. Don't pretend you're an innocent bystander." Evelyn stepped between us. "Get out," she said to me, her voice shaking. "Get out and never come back." I looked at them, Evelyn protective, Marcus cowering, and felt the last shred of attachment snap. "Gladly," I said. As I walked back to my house, I could feel the eyes of the neighbors on me. Auntie Wong stood in her doorway, her hand over her mouth. Old Manly shook his head slowly. I packed what little I still owned. The emerald dress was gone, traded for fabric. The silver coins were returned. The photo of my parents went into my bag. Everything else could stay. When I stepped out of the house for the last time, Evelyn was standing in the alley, watching me. "Where will you go?" she asked, and for the first time, there was something like genuine concern in her voice. "South," I said. "Where the future is." I didn't look back as I walked away. The slap had echoed, but it was the walking away that would resonate. Chapter 16, The Southbound Train. The train station at dawn was a chaotic symphony of steam, shouting, and the clatter of luggage wheels. I clutched my ticket, Guangzhou Express, the paper worn at the edges from repeated checking. The platform buzzed with vendors hawking steamed buns and newspapers, their voices blending with the distant whistle of the approaching locomotive. My bundle was light, a few changes of clothes, the notebook filled with shirt designs, and a wad of cash, 800 yuan now, from weeks of relentless market sales. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. The train groaned to a halt, belching black smoke that stung my eyes. As I boarded, a wave of emotion hit me, not nostalgia, but determination. 30 years ago, I'd boarded a similar train full of hope for a future that never came. This time, I was alone, but I was free. The compartment was crowded, mostly merchants and migrant workers. Across from me, a family huddled over a basket of lychees, the father's face etched with worry. I thought of Evelyn, pregnant, living with Marcus in borrowed happiness. Did she ever feel this fear? Or was her comfort too absolute to allow it? As the train lurched forward, I opened my notebook. The sketches had evolved since David's input, collared shirts with wider necks, lighter fabrics, subtle patterns that spoke to southern tastes. I'd need a workshop, workers, reliable suppliers. And I'd need to avoid the mistakes that had doomed my previous life, relying on others, trusting blindly, sacrificing my own dreams. The journey stretched into days. We passed rice paddies and factories, villages with thatched roofs and towns with billboards advertising new opportunities. In one station, I saw a poster for the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone, Opportunity Awaits. It felt like destiny calling. When we finally reached Guangzhou, the heat hit me like a furnace, thick, humid, smelling of exhaust and salt water mixed with rotting fruit from the markets. The station was a maze of shouting porters and touts offering rooms, jobs, fortunes. I ignored them, following the signs to the textile district. Mrs. Wu's contact, an old classmate named Helen Zhou, owned a small shop in a narrow alley off Renmin Road. She was a stout woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. "You're Victor," she said, not waiting for an answer. "Evelyn's fiancé. Heard you were coming." Her tone was neutral, but I sensed disapproval lurking beneath. "We called it off," I said. "I'm starting fresh." She nodded, her eyes scanning my bundle. "Fresh needs capital. You have any?" I showed her the cash. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Not bad for a mill worker. But it won't last long." She led me to a back room filled with bolts of fabric, nylon, polyester, cotton blends in every color imaginable. The market here is different from the north. Women want colors. Men want durability. Students want cheap. She tapped a bolt of bright orange nylon. "This sells fast. But it wrinkles like hell." I ran my hands over the material, feeling its texture, imagining it as finished shirts. "How much for 10 bolts?" She named a price that would leave me with barely enough for rent. I hesitated, then remembered Marcus's sneer about peasants. These weren't peasants, this was a city of millions, each with money to spend and dreams to chase. "Done," I said. As we wrapped the fabric, Helen spoke again. "Marcus Zhang's sister works at the Commerce Bureau. Heard Evelyn's been asking about you. Said you're operating without a license." I didn't flinch. "She's right. But I'll get one." She studied me, her eyes narrowing. "You're not like the others. You have fire in your eyes." Fire. I'd forgotten what that felt like. In my previous life, that fire had been smothered under Evelyn's indifference and my own desperation to please. Now it burned freely. "Fire keeps you warm," I said. "Or burns down what holds you back." Helen smiled for the first time. "Just make sure you know which is which." Chapter 17, First Steps. My first workshop was a rented room above a noodle shop, 10 feet square, with a single window that looked onto a bustling alley. The rent ate a third of my capital, but the location was perfect, right in the heart of the textile district where buyers roamed daily. I hired 2 women from a nearby village, sisters with calloused fingers and hopeful eyes. Their names were Mei and Hua, and they worked for 3 yuan a day, stitching shirts from Helen's fabric with practiced efficiency. I sketched designs while they sewed, my hands raw from cutting bolts with dull scissors. By week's end, I had 20 finished shirts. I loaded them onto a borrowed bicycle and pedaled to the wholesale market, my legs burning from the weight. The air was thick with the smell of fried dough and sweat, mixed with the cacophony of vendors shouting prices and customers haggling in various dialects. I set up my stall, the shirts stacked neatly on a folding table. A woman in a silk qipao paused, her eyes narrowing with interest. "New vendor?" "Yes." She picked up a shirt, examined the stitching with the eye of someone who knew quality. "Factory rejects?" "No." "Original designs?" She scoffed, her perfectly painted lips curling. "Original. I've seen 1,000 like this." I didn't argue. Instead, I showed her a shirt with a hidden pocket inside, something no factory-made shirt had, a detail David had suggested for men who needed to hide money from pickpockets. Her eyes widened. "Clever. How much?" I named a price. She haggled expertly, and I let her win, knowing the first sale mattered more than the profit margin. As she walked away with 3 shirts, I knew I'd made the right choice. By noon, all 20 shirts were gone. I counted the money, 250 yuan. Pure profit after costs. More than 2 months' wages at the factory, earned in 4 hours. That night, I wrote to Mrs. Wu. "Auntie, I'm safe. Business is good. Thank you for the introduction to Helen. I'll visit someday when fortune smiles." I didn't mention Evelyn. Or Marcus. Or the baby that would soon be born. Chapter 18, The Letter. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, the handwriting familiar, Evelyn's elegant script that I'd once admired. "Victor. You left without goodbye. Mother is heartbroken. I am too. We were meant to be. I'm carrying your child. Come home. Let's make this right. Please. Evelyn." I held the letter, my thumb tracing the words. "Your child. The phrase was a knife twisted slowly. In my previous life, I'd raised Marcus's child, believing it was mine, feeding him, clothing him, loving him, only to learn the truth on my deathbed. This time, I wouldn't be fooled. I tore the letter in half, then quarters, then eighths. The pieces fluttered into the trash bin like fallen cherry blossoms, delicate and meaningless. Outside, Helen's shop was closing for the day. She called up to me through my open window, "You have a visitor. Says she's from your hometown." My heart skipped. Evelyn. But when I descended the narrow stairs, it was Auntie Wang, her face etched with worry and road dust. "Evelyn's in trouble," she whispered urgently, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. "Marcus's child was born premature. Died after 3 days. Now she's blaming you. Says your abandonment caused it." I felt nothing. No guilt, no sorrow, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. "She's planning to come to Guangzhou," Auntie Wang continued. "Says she'll find you and make you take responsibility." I nodded slowly. "Let her come. This time, I'm ready." As Auntie Wang left, pressing a small package of homemade dumplings into my hands despite my protests, Helen watched from her doorway. She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Fire needs fuel," she said. "Don't let hers burn you." I went back upstairs, took out my notebook, and began sketching new designs, bold colors, innovative cuts that would set my shirts apart from every other vendor in Guangzhou. The past was behind me. The future was in my hands. And if Evelyn wanted to chase ghosts, let her. I was building something real. Chapter 19, The Confrontation. She arrived on a Tuesday, when the morning market was in full swing. I was demonstrating a new shirt design to a potential buyer when I felt someone watching me. I looked up. Evelyn stood at the edge of my stall, thinner than I remembered, her face drawn and pale. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her clothes, once immaculate, hung loosely on her frame. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in weeks. "Victor," she said, her voice barely audible over the market noise. I turned back to my customer, completed the sale, and only then acknowledged her. "Evelyn. We need to talk. I'm working." Her face flushed with anger and something else, desperation. "Please. Just 5 minutes." I glanced at David, who'd been organizing inventory nearby. He nodded, understanding, and took over the stall. We walked to a small tea house at the market's edge. Inside, the air was cooler, scented with jasmine and chrysanthemum. We sat at a corner table, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "The baby died," she said finally, her voice hollow. "Auntie Wang told me. I'm sorry for your loss." She looked up sharply. "That's all? Just sorry? What else would you have me say?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It was your fault. If you hadn't left, if you'd been there, maybe." "Stop," I cut her off, my voice firm but not cruel. "The child wasn't mine. You know it. I know it. Don't insult us both with lies." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "How can you be so cold?" "I'm not cold. I'm just done being manipulated." I leaned forward. In my last life, I stopped, realizing how insane it would sound. "I mean, I've learned. You never wanted me, Evelyn. You wanted security, convenience, someone to blame when things went wrong. But I'm not that person anymore. Marcus left me," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out. "After the baby died, he said I was cursed. He took the money I'd saved for us and disappeared. The factory demoted me because of the scandal. Mother won't speak to me." Her voice cracked. "I have nothing left. I should have felt triumph. Vindication. Some dark satisfaction that karma had finally caught up with her. Instead, I felt only a distant pity, like watching a stranger's tragedy unfold." "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said quietly. "Truly. But it's not my burden to carry." "I'll change," she pleaded, reaching across the table to grasp my hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "I was wrong about everything. About Marcus, about you. I see it now. We can start over. You're doing well here, I can help. I'm educated, I know business. I gently pulled my hand away. Evelyn, you don't want me. You want rescue. There's a difference. That's not true, she insisted, her voice rising. Heads turned at nearby tables. I care about you. I always did, I just didn't realize. You care about what I represent now, I interrupted. Safety. Stability. Someone who won't abandon you. But that's not love. That's not even respect. It's just fear. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. So you'll just leave me to suffer? After everything you did, I corrected, my voice hardening despite my best efforts. You orchestrated my firing. You gave my job to Marcus. You spent my engagement meant for our future on another man. You tried to sabotage my business here through your connections. I counted each item on my fingers. And now, when your choices have consequences, you want me to save you from them. I made mistakes, she cried. Can't you forgive me? I already have, I said, and realized it was true. The anger that had consumed me in my previous life, that had eaten at me even in my first weeks in Guangzhou, was gone. I forgive you, Evelyn. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It just means I'm not letting your choices poison my future anymore. I stood, placing money on the table for the tea we hadn't touched. Go home. Make peace with your mother. Find work. Build a life. But build it without me. She grabbed my sleeve, desperation making her grip fierce. Please, Victor. I have nowhere else to go. That's not true, I said, gently loosening her fingers. You have the same choices everyone has. You can stay stuck in regret, or you can move forward. But I can't make that choice for you. As I walked away, she called after me, you've become heartless. I paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. She looked small, broken, a shadow of the confident woman who'd once looked down on me with such disdain. No, I said softly. I've just learned that my heart belongs to me. Not to people who only want it when they have nothing else. Chapter 20, Unexpected News. 2 months later, business was thriving. David and I had expanded to a proper workshop with 15 employees. We'd secured contracts with 3 major retailers in Shanghai and Shenzhen. The designs that had started as desperate sketches were now sought after across southern China. I was reviewing inventory ledgers when Helen Jo appeared at my door, her expression grave. News from your hometown, she said, handing me a telegram. My hands shook slightly as I read. Evelyn Wu deceased. Took own life. Funeral arrangements pending. Your presence requested but not required. Mrs. Wu. The paper slipped from my fingers. David, who'd been nearby, picked it up and read it, his face paling. Victor. I'm so sorry. I sat down slowly, my mind racing. Dead. Evelyn was dead. In my previous life, she'd outlived me, standing by my hospital bed with cold efficiency. Now she was gone, and I was thriving. I should feel something, I said aloud, testing the words. Shouldn't I? Helen sat across from me. What do you feel? I searched inside myself, examining my emotions like a physician checking for disease. Sadness. A little. Guilt. Some. Relief. Yes, and that made me feel monstrous. I feel like a chapter has closed, I said finally. A sad chapter, but one that needed to end. Will you go to the funeral? David asked. I thought of the alley, the factory, the neighbors who'd watched my humiliation. I thought of Mrs. Wu, who'd tried her best to do right by both her daughter and the orphan she'd taken in. I thought of Evelyn, desperate and alone at the end. Yes, I said. I'll go. Not for her. For Mrs. Wu. And for closure. The journey north was long, giving me time to think. When I arrived at the town, it looked smaller, shabbier than I remembered. The factory had closed 2 months prior, part of the wave of state enterprise failures I'd known was coming. The alley where I'd lived was quieter, many houses empty as families moved away seeking work. Mrs. Wu had aged terribly. Her hair was completely white, her face creased with grief. When she saw me, she began to weep. Victor. You came. Of course, Auntie. The funeral was small. Marcus didn't attend, word was he'd gone to Shenzhen and married someone else. A few old neighbors came. Auntie Wang wept openly. Old Manly paid his respects with silent dignity. Evelyn's casket was simple wood, not the ornate affair she might have wanted in better times. There was no photo of her smiling. Mrs. Wu had chosen one from her university days, when hope still lit her eyes. After the service, Mrs. Wu pulled me aside. She left a letter. For you. My hands trembled as I opened it. Victor. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that you were right about everything. I was selfish. I was cruel. I took your kindness for granted and your love for weakness. I thought I deserved better than you, when the truth was I never deserved you at all. Marcus was a fantasy. The life I imagined with him was built on lies and other people's money. You built something real with your own hands, and I was too proud to see its value. I heard about your success in Guangzhou. Mother showed me a letter from Helen Zhou. You're thriving. You're happy. That's how I know I made the right decision. You deserve a future unburdened by my mistakes. Please take care of Mother when I'm gone. She loves you like the son she wished she had. I'm sorry. For all of it. Evelyn. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my pocket. Mrs. Wu watched me, her eyes searching. She loved you, in her way, she said softly. She just didn't know how to show it until it was too late. I know, I said. And I did. It didn't change anything, but it provided a kind of peace. Will you stay? Mrs. Wu asked. I'm selling the house, moving to Beijing to live with my sister. But before I go, I'll stay a few days, I promised. Help you sort things out. That night, I walked through the alley one last time. Marcus's house was empty, the door sealed with official notices. My old room was exactly as I'd left it, the furniture covered in dust. I stood in the doorway, remembering the men I'd been, desperate, dependent, willing to sacrifice everything for scraps of affection. That man was gone. In his place was someone stronger, clearer, free. Chapter 21, New Foundations. 3 years later. The factory sprawled across 3 city blocks in Guangzhou's industrial district. Chen Textiles was emblazoned on the gate in bold red characters. Inside, 200 workers operated state-of-the-art machinery, producing shirts, dresses, and jackets that exported to Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and even Europe. I stood in my office, a real office, with glass walls overlooking the production floor, reviewing contracts with David, who'd become my partner and closest friend. The German order is confirmed, he said, grinning. 5,000 units. They love the quality. Good. What about the new fabric line? Helen's supplier delivered samples yesterday. I think you'll be impressed. As if summoned, Helen Zhou appeared at the door, but she wasn't alone. A young woman stood beside her, late 20s, with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing. Victor, this is Lily Wang. She's a textile engineer from Shanghai. I thought you two should meet. Lily extended her hand. Mr. Chen. I've heard a lot about your work. Very innovative. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, professional. Helen speaks highly of you as well. What brings you to Guangzhou? Opportunity, she said simply. The north is stagnant. The future is here. I found myself smiling. I said almost the same thing once. Over tea, Lily explained her ideas for new synthetic blends, breathable fabrics suited for southern climates, innovative dyeing techniques. She spoke with passion and expertise, her hands moving expressively as she described technical processes. David caught my eye and smiled knowingly. Would you be interested in consulting for us? I asked. Or perhaps something more permanent? I'd like that, Lily said. Very much. As she and Helen left to tour the factory, David leaned back in his chair. She's brilliant. And I noticed she's not wearing a ring. I laughed. Is that why you kept grinning like an idiot? I'm just saying, successful businessman, Beautiful engineer, shared interests. He waggled his eyebrows. You've been reading too many romance novels. Mrs. Wu would approve. The mention of Mrs. Wu sobered me. She'd passed away the previous winter, peacefully in her sleep in Beijing. Her sister had written to inform me. I'd sent flowers and a donation to her favorite temple. She would, I agreed quietly. She wanted me to be happy. That evening, I found myself on the factory roof, a habit I'd developed when I needed to think. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Below, the city hummed with life and possibility. Lily joined me, appearing silently at my side. Beautiful view. It is. Helen told me your story, she said. Not all of it, I'm sure. But enough to know you've overcome a lot. We all have our struggles. True. But not everyone transforms them into this. She gestured at the factory below. Most people just survive. You've thrived. I thought of Evelyn, of Marcus, of the men I'd been in my previous life, dying alone, bitter, full of regrets. I thought of the second chance I'd been given, and how I'd seized it with both hands. I had help, I said. Mrs. Wu. Helen. David. Good people who believed in me when I was starting to believe in myself. And now? Now I want to build something that lasts. Not just a business, a legacy. Something that helps others the way I was helped. Lily smiled. I'd like to be part of that, if you'll have me. I turned to her, really seeing her for the first time, not just her competence or her beauty, but the kindness in her eyes, the strength in her posture, the possibility she represented. I think I'd like that too. Epilogue, 5 years later. The school's ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a modest crowd. It was nothing fancy, a vocational training center in a poor district of Guangzhou, designed to teach textile skills to unemployed workers and rural migrants. The Chen Wu Technical Institute, the sign read. I'd named it for Mrs. Wu, who'd given me my start, and for the second chance I'd been given. Lily stood beside me, our daughter sleeping in her arms. Little May was 2 years old, with my eyes and Lily's stubborn chin. Our son, Wei, held my hand, asking endless questions about the ribbon and the scissors and why people were clapping. David and his wife managed the daily operations of Chen Textiles now, freeing me to focus on the institute and new ventures. Helen Zhou sat in the front row, beaming with pride at what her introduction had sparked. As I cut the ribbon, I thought of the journey that had brought me here. The factory layoff that had seemed like the end of the world. The humiliation in the alley. The desperate flight south. The years of building, failing, learning, growing. I thought of Evelyn sometimes, less often now, and without the sharp pain that had once accompanied her memory. She'd been a chapter in my story, an important one, but not the whole book. In my previous life, I died with nothing but regrets. In this life, I'd built something meaningful. Not just wealth or success, though those had come, but connection, purpose, family. After the ceremony, an older woman approached me. She looked vaguely familiar. Mr. Chen. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Auntie Wang, from the old neighborhood. I clasped her hands warmly. Of course. How are you? Well, thank you. I came to Guangzhou to live with my son. When I heard about this institute. She gestured around. I wanted to see what you'd become. And to tell you, Evelyn would be proud. Wherever she is. I thought about that. Would she? The Evelyn I'd known had looked down on market vendors and factory work. But perhaps, in the end, she'd learned to value different things. Thank you, Auntie. That means a lot. As the sun set on the opening day, Lily and I stood on the institute's roof, my favorite place for reflection now, a tradition carried from the factory. Happy? She asked, leaning against me. I looked at the city spread below us, glowing with lights as evening fell. I thought of the students who would learn here, the families who would benefit, the ripples spreading outward from this small stone thrown in a vast pond. Yes, I said. I am. In my pocket, I still carried one silver coin, not from Mrs. Wu, but one I'd purchased myself after my first major success. On one side was a phoenix, rising from flames. On the other, I'd had an inscription engraved. From ashes, flight. It reminded me that endings could be beginnings. That loss could become gain. That the man I'd been, desperate, dependent, diminished, had transformed into someone I could respect. Lily took my hand. The children are getting sleepy. Should we head home? Home. A real home, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. A home with laughter and mess and love. Yes, I said. Let's go home. As we walked down the stairs, Wei asked, Papa, will you tell us a story? What kind of story? One about a man who was sad but became happy. I smiled, lifting him onto my shoulders. I know just the one. And as we drove through the Guangzhou streets, children dozing in the back seat, Lily humming softly beside me, I told them a story. Not quite my story, they were too young for the whole truth, but a version of it. A story about second chances. About choosing yourself when others won't choose you. About building something real with your own hands. About the difference between surviving and thriving. About a man who learned, finally, that the greatest love story isn't about finding someone to complete you, it's about becoming whole enough to share your completeness with others. The past was a ghost, but ghost couldn't touch me anymore. The future was mine. And it was bright.